O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. So with these words, I welcome Shikharji and request him to start the session.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good evening, everyone. I'll just share the slide for a while for the image, and then we'll talk directly. So, as you are all aware that this is a very long letter, but also a very important letter based, which came out of the query of one member regarding the post-mortem states. Until now, in the last two sessions, we have had something about we have studied something about the Devachan. But I think to study after death states, it is very important and again to refresh the constitution of a human being. Because when we know the constitution properly, then we know how to assemble something, and we can say disassemble something, or make it into parts and then bring it back together. So when we know that deeply, then it becomes relatively easier to understand intellectually what is being talked about in the Mahatma letters or in any such literature. Because of course, until unless we experience it with awareness and while we are conscious in the after-death states, till then it will only be an intellectual study, basically the words. And the words are not the thing. So we have to be always aware of this, that we are studying all this, but let us not make some fixed ideas about these things. And also that a lot of different kinds of words are used. I think in the last lecture, last discussion also, we found out what happens when the fight between the upper duality, Atma Buddhi, and the Kama Manas, if one wins, what happens? If another wins, what happens? The eighth sphere, the planet of death, or Avicii. So if we find in different sources, maybe in HPB's collected writings, secret doctrine, Mahatma letters. So the thing is that we never reach to a conclusive thing. There is always certain blank or certain doubt which is left. And I think, which also HPB herself said that, and Mahatma also said that these are the things to actually give us something to contemplate, to think. And out of that contemplation, out of that churning of the mind, sometimes the intuition, when it flashes upon the mind, we get some light and we understand a fraction of it. So that's why while studying all these things, we actually, what I think, maybe different people may think differently, that we should not make any fixed ideas or fixed opinions that this is it. So coming to the Constitution, because even regarding the Constitution, if we read, any Besant has given in one way, HPB has given another way, and then there are 2-3 ways of expressing it. We cannot say this one is correct or that one is wrong or this is wrong, another one is correct. But basically these are the things that are viewed from a different perspective and maybe for a different purpose. So that's why the difference is. Because the similar things will come in the later ahead also. So what we studied, that there are 7 principles: Atma, Buddhi, Manas, and then the higher triad, you can say, and Kama, Linga Sharira, that is etheric double, Prana, and Sthul Sharira, which are here, group 1, 2, and 3. And how we studied that upon death, the body, life principle, and vital body or etheric double are disintegrated. Life principle goes into the universal life. And then the Kama Rupa or desire principle, and the Manas, mind principle, and then Atma and Buddhi. And then there comes a struggle between this Kama Manas. And if Atma Buddhi wins, with it is able to take out some of the good things from the higher Manas, it goes into astral plane and later in gestation state, and then to Devachan, and the lower Manas with Kam remains like a shell attached with it, and slowly disintegrates. And this is that shell which comes into the seances when people are inviting spirits in those times, and they thought they are some angel guides or some really highly spiritual spirit or who is coming to interact with them. So now let us come and then the question of importance next. There are basically only 3 more questions left, and the last question, the answer to that is very, very long, which will go on till the next session also. So now the question arises in the mind of Mr. A.P. Sinnett, that the period of gestation we had earlier studied, that after this struggle happens, if the upper duality wins, then the ego goes in the gestation state after the Kamalokic term is expired, before entering into Devachan. It's kind of pre-Devachanic unconsciousness, sleeping. It is the same time basically like a child is in the womb. So before coming into the world, it is being prepared, and when the time is right, it's fully prepared, it comes out, it takes birth, we say. So similarly, between Kamaloka and lower mental plane, astral and lower mental plane, or astral and Devachan, this gestation period happens, about which he's questioning, that the period of gestation between death and Devachan has till now conceived by me to be very long. Then he also says that in some instances it is only few days, and in no cases, he thinks, in no case it is more than few years. So Mr. A.P. Sinnett wants a clear understanding or clear some definition or explanation, because it is a very important aspect of the after-death state. So in answer to that, Mahatma replies, because there are some other references in some letters where HPV might have written about something called Bardo, B-A-R-D-O, Bardo. So there was some confusion regarding that. So Mahatma says, this is an example of habitual disorder in which Mrs. HPB's mental furniture is kept. She talks of Bardo and does not even say to her readers what it means. It's kind of like in a lighter vein, he says that just like in her writing room, there is confusion because we read while she used to write the secret doctrine or anything, the papers were lying everywhere and she was just writing and throwing the papers here and there, and later they were arranged in that order. So a lot of confusion was there. So he's saying in her mind, it's even 10 times more. And when she wants to, and in such a state, when she wants to express those ideas, the tail peeps out before the head, kind of saying that the end of the sentence comes out before the beginning of the sentence, or the end of the concept comes before the beginning of the concept. So first of all, he says Bardo has nothing to do with the duration of time in the case you are referring to. So he is referring about the gestation period and how long is it. So in this case, he says Bardo has nothing to do, because what is Bardo? He says Bardo is the period between death and rebirth and may last from a few years to a kalpa. So basically the entire period when the Jivatma has left the physical body till the next birth, the whole period is Bardo. And it can be anything from few years to a kalpa. And this whole period is divided into 3 sub-periods, he says. First, when the ego, delivered of its mortal coil, enters into Kamloka. So, once what we call the death of a person, from that point onwards, I mean, when he enters into the Kamloka till the next time, which is when it enters into its gestation state. So that period in the Kamloka, and again the same extending to when it enters into gestation state, and then after the gestation state, when it enters or reborn into the Roop Loka of Devachan, that is lower mental plane. About the sub-period 1, that is when the ego enters into the Kama Loka or astral plane, he says it can be a few minutes. This whole period can be a few minutes to a number of years. And the phrase years, I mean few years, he's also saying that becomes puzzling and utterly worthless without a more complex explanation. Few minutes, of course, we understand that if a person has lived a life of austerity, ethics, and spirituality, worked on oneself, and what we study at the feet of the master with viveka, vairagya, sadachar, and love and prem. So to a lot extent, the astral body must be very fine, must be having very fine matter with very few desires or other tendencies of jealousy or hatred. So it will be a very short time, few minutes even, if it is a really evolved person, to pass through the astral plane. But it can be also many years, considering the case of a person who has not done this, who has led a life, different kind of life in the opposite direction, plus some cases of which he talks at the end of the letter. We'll come to that regarding suicides, cases of suicides and cases of accidents, which also have to stay quite a long time in years, depending on the personal case, in the Kamaloka. So that's what he means about the complex explanation, which he will explain at the end, which we'll come to again, we'll visit again. Then subperiod 2 is very long. What is subperiod 2? That is the question of Mr. A.P. Sinha. Gestation state, when it enters into its gestation state. As you say, longer sometimes than you may even imagine. So even this can be very long, but again, it can be from few minutes to years, because the next sentence he says, it is yet proportionate to the ego's spiritual stamina. Now, what is the spiritual stamina of an ego? If someone, like for a sports person, the stamina can be checked, measured in various ways, by running or by lifting a weight, or in different sport, the stamina will be checked by different way. But ego's spiritual stamina, as far as I understand, it is, of course, the how much evolved that individual person is, in the sense how much mature the soul is, and how much it can take, and how quickly it can pass on from one state to another. Let's say even in life, while we are alive, suppose somebody does something wrong to us. Now, one person is there who will remember it for the rest of his life and will never forgive. Okay, forget, of course, we cannot forget anything because it remains in the memory. We can only, if we make an effort to forgive the person. But another person is someone, if something happens, if somebody does something wrong, also may forgive maybe one day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, or various possibilities are there, depending upon the person's maturity, person's understanding of life, and what that feeling of revenge or negativity is doing to oneself. So there is a variety of people in between, from the person who is not forgiving for the rest of the life and the person who is forgiving very quickly. So the same thing here is, the Jivatma has spent the time in Kamaloka now, getting rid of the desires and the lower qualities, lower desires that the person has had during the life. That's what happens in Kamaloka. So once they are exhausted, so before a changeover, now the ego is going to be in the Devachan, where it is not going to have any communication or memory of what is going on earth, or what all sorrows, what all sufferings that person had in the last life, because that is what the Maya of Devachan, that it is a state of being where everything which is blissful, which is pleasurable, which is happy, surrounds the Jeev. And if there is any memory of any suffering or sorrow, then it cannot be Devachan. So to prepare that Jeev for the next stage of Devachan, I think this gestation period is like a preparation for that. And depending upon the spiritual stamina, as the master says, if the person is evolved, it will be very short or maybe very quick, as he says in the Kamaloka, it can be minutes, it can be years. So similarly, depending upon the person, this period will last. And the third period, when it is reborn, and we will visit again to this gestation, because as we earlier discussed, that during this Kamalokic stage, there is a struggle between Atma Buddhik and Kama Manas. So only that ego which has had some good quality of matter, higher mental matter, that is of selflessness, service, love, all that matter was there, then only that Atma Buddhi duality will win, and then only it will go in gestation. Otherwise, the connection between the higher two principles, Atma Buddhi and Kama Manas, will break, and it will not go into gestation. So we will revisit it later. The third period, that is when it is reborn in Rupaloka of Devachan, that is the lower mental, lasts in proportion to the good karma, after which monad is again reincarnated. So that we already have studied, that in Devachan, first in the Rupa Loka of Devachan, whatever good thoughts, good words, good deeds the person has done in the last life, the causes, the effect of those will be in the form of reward to that person, and the duration of that will be in proportion to that. Quoting the Agam Sutra, Master says, but even in these Rup Lokas, even in Devachan, the Devas or spirits are equally subjected to birth, decay, old age, and death. Means here also, even if the ego comes in Devachan, once the savings account or whatever you can say of good karma becomes zero, again that cycle of rebirth, again it has to come down, because now all the good karma, account of good karma is zero. So now again it begins fading out and finally dies. That is, dies in this case will be, it will leave the Devachan and falls into unconscious condition which precedes rebirth. And as the Devas emerge from these heavens, that is, from the Devachan, they come down, they enter the lower world again. That is, they leave the world of bliss to be reborn in the world of causes, which is this earth, physical body. Now, the next question is a very quick one. He's asking, in that case, and assuming that Devachan is not only the heritage of adepts and persons who are equally elevated, there is a condition of existence which can be comparable to heaven actually being there, from which the life of earth may be watched by an immense number of those who have gone before. This we have already discussed in the previous discussions, and just now also, that even if we study, sometimes we have this idea that spirit, no, once we leave the body, we are the spirit and we become omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. But that is exactly not the case, because that's where we learn how it happens step by step. So in the, first of all, Devachan is not only the place for the adepts. And he is saying that, just a minute, I will silence my phone. And if you want to use the word heaven, okay, that's okay if you want to use that astrogeographical Christian term, but life of earth can be watched by none of these, only of course by the adepts and those who are evolved initiates, who can move freely through these planes, can view. But other than that, who are still in the cycle of karma, they cannot watch for the reasons of law of bliss plus Maya already given, which means if the person is in Devachan and the person can still see the family members on the earth crying and suffering, and so how can that Devachan be blissful? So that is why the Maya and the law of bliss in Devachan. And the next question he asked, for how long in Devachan a person stays? For years, for decades, for centuries, or what? So Master answers, not only for years, decades, or centuries, but millenniums, and oftentimes multiplied by something more. Why? Because it all depends on the karma of the person while he was alive. And he gives a very beautiful example to explain that let's have a small cup, fill it with oil, and put a cotton wick and burn it. For how long it will burn? Maybe 2 hours, like Diwali nights or some other occasion or festival, we light up the diyas. So if a small diya will light up for a couple of hours maybe, and then we have to refill the oil until otherwise it will go off. Now, imagine another situation like a city reservoir of water, no? Like a pond, big pond. Imagine it to be full of oil, and there is a wick, and then lighting that wick with so much of oil. How long do we think it will light up? It will continue to light up. Similarly, the ego is the wick and the karma, the oil. And the sheer difference in the quantity of the oil in the cup, that is in the cup, and a big reservoir or a pond or big big body of oil. We can easily understand how long the stay in Devachan will be. That is, he's saying that you can see the great difference in the duration of various karmas, because every effect must be proportionate to the cause. And as man's terms of incarnate existence, he's saying the time that the person is in the physical body as compared to the time not in the physical body is very small. That is, the internatal existence in the Manvantaric cycle is way too much. And very small part we spend here in the physical body. So, the good thoughts, words, and deeds of any one of these individuals on the globe are the cause, the working out of which requires far more time than the evolution of the causes occupied. You see, suppose if we have a cup made of porcelain in front of us, to break it, it requires 1 instant, right? We just throw it and it will be broken in pieces. But now if somebody tells us to, bring it back together, it will take hours and hours and hours maybe to bring it back together. So the cause was very small, but the consequences, if we want it in the same condition again, will take a lot of time. So therefore, he says, when we read in the Jatak Katha, Jatak stories and other fabulous stories of Buddhist scripture, that some good action of somebody was rewarded by kalpas of several figures of bliss, do not smile at the absurd exaggeration, but bear in mind what I have said. Because from a small seed, he gives the example, sprung a tree whose life endures now for 22 centuries. He is giving example of the Anuradhapur bo tree in Sri Lanka, which is at that time 22 centuries. So we can add another 150 years to that while we are discussing it today, that it is almost 24 centuries old now. So a small seed, but it has, from that such a large tree, and also such a long duration it is in existence. So we can imagine our thoughts. Maybe I become angry for 1 minute, but that thought forms remains alive for many, many hours, for 36 hours or 40 hours, after even when I have become, I do not have anger anymore. So that's why Master is saying, nor must you laugh if you come across Pinddan or any other Buddhist sutra which says, between the Kamaloka and the Rup Loka, there is a locality, the dwelling of Mara. Now, we are coming to that point which I said earlier, that once the Jeev is in the Kamaloka, then a gestation period before going into the Devachan or lower mental or Rup Loka. So in the scriptures, that's why it is very important to try to understand the symbolism of any scriptures. He says, if we come across this sentence, we should not laugh or criticize it, because this Mara, filled with passion and lust, destroys all virtuous principles as a stone grinds scorn. So in the bracket, it is also, he comments that this Mara, as you may well think, is the allegorical image of the sphere called the planet of death, the whirlpool where disappear the lives doomed to destruction. it is between Kam and Rupaloka that the struggle takes place. His palace is 7,000 yojanas square and is surrounded by a sevenfold wall, and you will feel now more prepared to understand the allegory. The similar allegory he gave about the Devachan from the quotation of one of the Buddhist literature, that it has 7 rows of trees and railings and mountains. So basically what he's saying, that between astral plane and the lower mental plane, there is this struggle that is taking place. And the good thing actually, which is in favor of humanity, why such cases is rare, that the ego has already is on the journey towards the closing journey of the astral plane. So it means it has got rid of, or a lot of desires or lower attributes have been exhausted or gotten rid of. So most likely, if there is even a slightest bit of goodness in the person, there is a lot of chances that Atma Buddhi will attract the Manas principle, the goodness, that little goodness, because the Kam is little bit, weaker at this point, and it will go in Devachan, gestation, and in Devachan. So that's why it is said that such happenings, events, when the connection between the monad and the personality breaks, or the chances to go to planet of death or Avicii or the 8th sphere are very rare. Maybe that is the reason it is in the the ladder of evolution. That's how it is placed, that it is actually kind of favoring the evolution. I'm favoring the person to evolve, not to go to destruction. Similarly, he gives an example how some of the English translators, the English scholars like Beale, Burnouf, or French scholars, Burnouf and Rhys Davids, English, in the innocence of their Christian and materialistic souls, indulge in such translations as they generally do. We do not bear them malice for their commentaries, since they cannot know any better. And that's what has happened a lot, that which is also a reason for misunderstanding sometimes, that Hinduism is polytheism, because a lot of translators who have translated as there are so many gods and goddesses that Hindus, they worship so many gods. So it's like polytheism. But actually, if we study the Upanishads and the source of these gods and goddesses as the functions and powers of that one principle, it is actually pantheism. That everywhere is that one principle, which is working through various agencies, and it is expressed in different forms. So they are saying that when these people with the Christian and materialistic souls indulge in such translation, that is, without having any background, and materialistic souls means with that kind of attitude, so the meanings are not accurate, the translations are not accurate and misleading. For example, he says the names of the heavens. Now he is actually going to give an example where the entities who live in the subjective world around us, subjective world, that is, we can in one way say the invisible world. One is the objective physical world we can see, but subjective world which is continuously influencing us, we are influencing that world. We can call it astral, mental, and higher planes. So about the heavens, they translated the names of the heavens. He says it is a mistranslation because they are lokas, and lokas are not heavens, but localities or abodes. It's like in a city, we have a locality called bank, we have a locality called post office, we have a locality called a school or hospital. So each, due to the difference in the nature of the function, it has a different locality. So similarly, this is a mistranslation because it's a lok, not a heaven. Loka of desire, Kam Loka, which is called, because the beings who occupy them are subject to desires. And they are otherwise called the abodes of the 5 orders of sentient creatures. This is the translation. Devas, men, asuras, beasts, and demons. I know there is a lot of terminology here, and while we are saying many of this, we may remember or not remember, but these are for general information that how even invisible words, there are entities and beings, and they are not something extra terrestrial or something coming from outside, but they are part of the system only, from humanity only, or before humanity, or those who have crossed humanity are all in this system. Together they are going. So the 5 the 5 types of these subjective beings, which Mr. Beale has translated: Devas, men, asuras, beasts, and demons. So the master clarifies that if that respected translator was acquainted with the true doctrine little better, he would have first of all divided the devas into 2 classes, as we study: Rupa devas and Arupa devas. Rupa devas means the form or objective, and the formless or the subjective. Dhyani Chauhans. Devas, Dhyani Chauhans. And second, he would have done the same for his class of men, since there are shells and Mararupas. Because instead of writing men, because the men who are dead basically, who are not in the physical body, though they are in the subjective world. So because there are shells and there are Mararupas who are bodies doomed to annihilation by following that rare path of planet of death. So total there are 7 classifications. First is Rupa Devas, which are the Dhyani Chauhans, having forms, who have crossed from the human evolution and now in that position to guide that evolution, or they are given charge of certain part of that evolution. Then Arupa Devas, that is the Dhyani Chauhans, who have no forms. Also, they are ex-human beings who have crossed that evolution. Then Pishachas, which are true principled ghosts. Again, we'll come to that later when it's the person who dies and they have still strong desires and attachment to the physical vibrations. They want to come in contact with the living people. So they only have right now Kama and Manas. So they try to come in the touch of mediums to fulfill their own desires and gratify themselves. So that are what they are called. And then Mararupas, which are doomed to death, 3 principles. So I was thinking maybe or may not be, these are the ones who have disconnected with their higher duality, Atma Buddhis, and now they are on that path of destruction, of going to the planet of death. And maybe apart from the Kam and Manas principle, or either the Manas is due to duality, they are called 3 principled, or maybe with Kam and Manas, they still have that etheric double attached. Due to that, they are called 3 principled in the letters. That is not explained. So we all have to do some thinking over it. And then Asuras, which are elementals having human form, which will be human beings in future evolution. Beasts, elementals of 2nd class, animal elementals, which will also become future human beings. And Rakshasas, or demon souls, or astral forms of some magicians, sorcerers, who have reached the height of the knowledge in the forbidden art. dead or alive, they have, so to say, cheated nature, but it is only temporary. So here he is also giving a hint of some of those individuals who follow the left-hand path, as mentioned also in the practical occultism, and instead of going through the path of selflessness, of compassion, they go to the path of extreme selfishness and use some of the ways and means to acquire power or knowledge of the forbidden art, and then use it for the personal motives. But they also do not last forever. Why? Because they are only there until our planet goes into pralaya, obscuration, after which they have no choice but to be annihilated. So they think that they will continue forever, but once the planet goes into pralaya, they also, I think, goes into that planet of death where they are doomed for destruction. And it is these 7 groups that form the principal divisions of the dwellers of the subjective world, that is the invisible around us. And it is the group 1, that is the Roop Devas, that is the Dhyani Chauhans, who are the ex-human beings, who are the intelligent rulers of the world of matter, and who, with all this intelligence, are but the blindly obedient instruments of the One, that is the divine plan, the active agents of a passive principle. That passive principle, that is the Impara Brahman, when it becomes manifested, there is a universal mind, but to hold that universal mind, the Dangmas or the evolved spiritual beings or the planetary spirits, the various names that we can give are needed, the different hierarchies of devas. But they are there only to blindly, it is said they are intelligent, but blindly obedient instruments of the One. Because now their will actually is the divine will, or divine will is their will. And so this is the whole explanation behind the wrong translation, what is being done and read and understood by the Western philosophers. Okay, couple of minutes more and then I will stop. So, and thus are misinterpreted and mistranslated nearly all our sutras. Yet, but that's what he's saying, but still someone who even superficially knows the true doctrine has some firm ground to stand. Like, even if right now we do not know what are all these things, but if we study, contemplate, meditate with intent, conviction, we will, be at least be going in the right direction. And also he says, thus for example, again he gives an example that to enumerating the 7 lokas of the Kam Loka, that is the 7 subplanes of the astral plane. One of the sutra says the 7th is the territory of doubt, that is the lowest, the heaviest, the coarsest of the part of the astral plane is the territory of doubt, means that is the state of consciousness there, because of the humans itself, when they go in that plane, of what kind of human, what action led us to that state, that is also important. But every such word within the sphere of effects has a Tathagata or Dhyani Chauhan to protect and watch over, not to interfere with it. Every such word. So, and that's what we study, that every plane, subplane, each of them have the guardians, and they also require helpers. And that's why in Theosophy, the concept of invisible helpers, or how even after death we can help, or while sleeping we can help, that is very important if we know. Also he says that the spiritualist will reject all these theories, all these doctrines that masters are telling, that they are blind superstitions, but instead of all these words, if the masters had used the words of Summerlands, and they have 7 boarding houses in it and 7 spirit guides to guide them, to boss in them, which are called angels or Saint Peter, Saint John's, etc., then they would welcome these doctrines with open arms. Because who has heard of Tathagata or Dhyani Chauhans or elementals? It is like, unimaginable or something, the creation of the mind. So next question, I will also just take it such very small thing, which is a P-Senate's question, that is there any intermediate condition between the bliss of Devachan and can we mute the microphone? Okay. That is there intermediate condition between the spiritual pleasure, bliss of the Devachan and those who are the remainings, those who are disconnected from their sixth principle, the Atma and Buddhi. Is there any intermediate condition? Because if there is, those people may come to contact these mediums, because Mahatma has already mentioned that once the Jeev goes into the Devachan, it cannot confabulate with the people on earth. So these mediums, whoever sensitive people, they are receiving these messages, they are not from anybody from Devachan. So he is asking, is there any other possibility of existence? So the master says, no, not that I know of, because from Devachan or Sukhavati down to territory of Tao, that is the lowest part of astral plane, there are a lot of spiritual states. Again, spiritual means relatively spiritual states, because every plane, every subplane basically, and who knows, maybe in a subplane also there are further subdivisions based on the different state of consciousness, but there is no any such intermediate conditions. He says, I have told you about Sakwalas, that is the lands of bliss, and also of Avichi, that is the hell from where there is no return. But this forlorn shadow, that is the person, the individual who has not left anything in him of the higher principle, has to do the best it can. Because as soon as it steps out, the forlorn shadow has to do the best it can, means as soon as it steps outside the Kamaloka, that is from Kamaloka gestation state, and in the Devachan, it cannot communicate with any easygoing mediums. No Ernest or Joey, whatever the names were at that time, has ever returned from the Roop Loka, let alone a Roop Loka, to hold sweet intercourse with mortals. So once they are in the Devachan, it's not just not possible, except in a very, very rare case. But what are the possibilities with which I will end is, there are better sort of reliquae, means the remainings, and the shells, or the earth walkers as they are called, which are not necessarily bad. Like we can call the astral bodies or the Kamamanas stage of the people who have died, who are not bad. But even those were made bad by the mediums, because the shells will not care. The shells are what? Just like when we leave the physical body, excuse me, the physical body now, I mean, it doesn't matter whether it is burned or buried or whatever is done to that, it does not matter, because the life is gone. Similarly, when the Jiva goes to Devachan, the astral shell and the Kamamanas, the shell is remaining, it may not care because it has nothing to lose. But there is another kind of spirits that we have lost sight of, the suicides and those killed by accidents. Both of these kinds can communicate with the mediums and the sensitive people, but in return they have to pay a big price for such visit. And how is it? He is going to explain, but We'll see that in the next session. Basically, this is the class which is called as suffering souls. They are an exception to the rule because they will remain in the earth attraction and its atmosphere, that is the Kamaloka, till the very last moment, that would have been their natural time of death. In other words, that particular wave of life evolution must run on to its shore. That is, if a person had to die, let's say about at 80 or 90 years of age, but due to some reason, due to accident or due to suicide, somebody ended their life before that, is still the remaining years they have to spend before moving on further. About that we'll talk later, and I think I have taken a lot of time. Sorry for that, and I think Vibhaji, we can.
Yes, thank you, Shikharji. No, you have been right on time, and this was really a very complex topic which you have been able to explain in a very understanding manner that we have understood well. So thank you so much, and I now invite Meenakshi ji to give us the translation in Hindi.
Thank you, sister. Thank you, brother. सभी को प्रणाम. आज हम लेटर नंबर 68 का अगला पार्ट ले रहे हैं. प्रश्न नंबर 7 सीनेट पूछते हैं, अब तक मेरा यह मानना था कि प्रत्येक में मृत्यु और देवाचन के बीच का जेस्टेशन पीरियड बहुत लंबा होता है. अभी ऐसे कहा जाता है कि कुछ में यह थोड़े दिनों का है, कुछ मामलों में यह कुछ वर्षों से अधिक नहीं है. ऐसा लगता है यह स्पष्ट रूप से बताया गया है, लेकिन मैं इसकी स्पष्ट रूप से पुष्टि चाहता हूँ. इस पर मास्टर उत्तर देते हैं कि मिसेस HPB यानी वे बार्डो के बारे में बात करती है और अपने पाठकों को यह भी नहीं बताती कि इसका क्या अर्थ है. बार्डो का समय की अवधि से कोई मतलब नहीं जिसके बारे में आप जिक्र कर रहे हैं. बार्डो मृत्यु और पुनर्जन्म के बीच की कालावधि है और यह कुछ वर्षों से लेकर एक कल्प तक रह सकती है. इसे 3 सब पीरियड्स में विभाजित किया गया है. पहला है जब जीवात्मा अपने नश्वर शरीर को छोड़कर कामलोक में प्रवेश करता है. दूसरा, जब वह जेस्टेशन स्टेट में प्रवेश करता है. तीसरा, जब देवाचन के रूप लोक में इसका पुनः जन्म होता है. सब पीरियड फर्स्ट कुछ मिनटों से लेकर कई वर्षों तक रह सकता है. सब पीरियड 2 बहुत लंबा है, जैसे कि आप कहते हैं. आप कल्पना नहीं कर सकते इतना कभी कभी ज्यादा लंबा होता है. फिर भी यह जीवात्मा के आध्यात्मिक स्तर के अनुपात में होता है. सब पीरियड 3 अच्छे कर्म के अनुपात में रहता है, जिसके बाद मोनाड का पुनः जन्म होता है. आगम सूत्र में कहा गया है, इन सभी रूप लोकों में देवताओं का भी समान रूप से जन्म, क्षय, वृद्धावस्था और मृत्यु होती है. माने यही कि जीवात्मा वहां जन्म लेता है, फिर क्षय होते होते अंत में मृत होता है, यानी कि उस अचेतन अवस्था में जाता है जो पुनर्जन्म से पहले होती है. और यह श्लोक समाप्त होता है कि जैसे ही देवता इन स्वर्गों से यानी देवाचन से बाहर निकलते हैं, वे फिर से निचले लोकों में प्रविष्ट होते हैं, अर्थात वे कार्य कारणों के लोक में पुनर्जन्म लेने के लिए आनंद के लोक को छोड़ देते हैं. प्रश्न 8 है, यह मानते हुए कि देवाचन केवल सिद्ध पुरुषों और उसी तरह के उन्नत पुरुषों की विरासत नहीं है, वास्तव में स्वर्ग के समान वाले अस्तित्व की स्थिति है, जिससे पृथ्वी पर के जीवन को उन असंख्य लोगों द्वारा देखा जा सकता है जो पहले ही जा चुके हो. और कब तक? क्या यह आध्यात्मिक आनंद की अवस्था सालों तक बनी रहेगी या दशकों तक, सदियों तक? मास्टर आंसर देते हैं, निश्चित ही देवाचन केवल सिद्ध पुरुषों की विरासत नहीं है और निश्चित ही स्वर्ग है. लेकिन पृथ्वी पर का जीवन इनमें से कोई भी देख नहीं सकता है। यह आनंद के नियम और माया के कारण है, जिसे पहले ही बताया गया है। यह अवस्था वर्षों, दशकों, सदियों और सहस्त्राब्दी के लिए कई बार अनेक गुना बनी रहती है। यह पूर्णतः कर्म की अवधि पर निर्भर करता है। आगे मास्टर कहते हैं कि एक छोटे से कप में तेल भरे और एक शहर के जलाशय में भी दोनों में अग्नि प्रज्वलित करके देखे कि कौन सा अधिक समय तक जलता है। जीवात्मा दीप की बत्ती है और तेल कर्म है। कप और जलाशय में तेल की मात्रा का अंतर आपको विभिन्न कर्मों की अवधि के बड़े अंतर को दर्शाता है। हर परिणाम कार्य कारण के अनुपात में होना चाहिए। और जैसे कि एक मनवंतरीय चक्र में मनुष्य के जीवन काल की अवधि उसके मृत्यु और जन्म के बीच की कालावधि की तुलना में कम है, इसीलिए एक ग्लोब पर इन जीवनों में से किसी एक जीवन के अच्छे विचार, वाणी और कार्य यह परिणामों के कारक हैं, जिसकी फल प्राप्ति को कारणों की वृद्धि में लगने वाले समय से अधिक समय लगता है। इसलिए जब आप बौद्ध ग्रंथों की और जातक कथा की अद्भुत कहानियां में पढ़ते हैं कि किसी न किसी अच्छे कार्य को कई कल्पों तक के परम आनंद से पुरस्कृत किया गया था, तब आप इस बेतुकी अतिशयोक्ति पर हंसे ना, बल्कि मैंने जो कहा उसे ध्यान में रखें। एक छोटे से बीज से एक ऐसा वृक्ष उग आया जो 2200 साल से जीवित है। मेरा मतलब अनुराधापुर के बोधि वृक्ष से है, जो श्रीलंका में स्थित है। न ही आपको पिंडदान या अन्य बौद्ध सूत्रों को यह पढ़कर हंसी आनी चाहिए कि कामलोक और रूपलोक के बीच एक ऐसा क्षेत्र है जो मार का निवास है। जैसे पत्थर मकई के दानों को पीसता है, वैसे यह मार जो जुनून और वासना से भरा पूरा है, वह सभी सत्वगुणी तत्वों को नष्ट कर देता है। इसके अलावा जब बिल या बर्नॉफ या रिस डेविड्स अपने ईसाई और भौतिकवादी दृष्टिकोण की अज्ञानता में ऐसे अनुवाद करते हैं जैसे कि वे अक्सर करते हैं, तब हम उन्हें उनके भाष्य पर उन्हें दोषी नहीं ठहराएंगे, क्योंकि वे इससे बेहतर नहीं जान सकते हैं। लेकिन निम्नलिखित वाक्य का क्या अर्थ हो सकता है? तथाकथित कामलोक इच्छा आकांक्षाओं का स्वर्ग है। यह गलत अनुवाद है। लोक यानी स्वर्ग नहीं, बल्कि इलाका या निवास स्थान है, क्योंकि यहाँ पर वास्तव्य करने वाले जीव खाने पीने, सोने और प्रेम की इच्छाओं के अधीन होते हैं। अन्यथा इन्हें देव, मनुष्य, असुर, पशु, राक्षस जैसे 5 प्रकार के जीवों का निवास कहा जाता है। उनका सीधा सा मतलब है कि यदि आदरणीय अनुवादक यथार्थ सिद्धांत से थोड़ा बेहतर परिचित होते, तब उन्होंने देवों को 2 वर्गों में विभाजित किया होता और उन्हें रूपदेव और अरूपदेव और इसी तरह अपनी तरह के मनुष्य के लिए भी किया होता। चूंकि वहां शेल्स और मार रूप है, अर्थात वह शरीर जिनका विनाश होना तय है, यह सब इस प्रकार से बताया जा सकता है कि पहला रूपदेव यानी ध्यान चौहान, जिन्हें रूप है, जो पहले मनुष्य थे। दूसरा है अरूपदेव, वह ध्यान चौहान जिन्हें कोई रूप नहीं है, जो पहले मनुष्य थे। तीसरा पिशाच यानी 2 तत्वों सहित प्रेतात्माएं। चौथा है मार रूप, जिनका विनाश निश्चित है, यह 3 तत्वों वाले हैं। पांचवा असुर यानी एलिमेंटल्स, जिन्हें मनुष्य रूप है, जो भविष्य में मानव बनेंगे। छठा है बीस्ट यानी पशु, जो 2nd क्लास के एलिमेंटल्स हैं। 7वां है राक्षस, यह तांत्रिक मांत्रिक की आत्माएं या एस्ट्रल फॉर्म्स, वासना शरीर है। वे मनुष्य जिन्होंने निषिद्ध कला, ज्ञान में महारत हासिल की थी। जीवित काल या मरने पर भी उन्होंने प्रकृति के साथ जालसाजी की। यह सब मात्र अस्थाई है, जब तक कि हमारा ग्रह प्रच्छन्नता में नहीं जाता, जिसके बाद उनका बहुत कुछ संहार होना है। यही 7 ग्रुप्स है जो प्रामुख्यता से हमारे चारों ओर के अदृश्य लोक के वासियों में से है। अग्रणी स्थान पर भूलोक के सिद्ध शासक है, और जो अपने सिद्धत्व सहित पर ब्रह्म के अतीव आज्ञाकारी साधन मात्र है। वे अक्रिय तत्व के सक्रिय कार्यकर्ता है। और इस प्रकार हमारे लगभग सभी सूत्रों की गलत व्याख्या और गलत अनुवाद किया गया है। और फिर भी मतों और शब्दों के उस उलझन में जो कुछ हद तक सही सिद्धांत को जानता है, उनके लिए ठोस आधार है। इस प्रकार उदाहरण के तौर पर अवतंसक सूत्र में कामलोक के 7 लोकों की गणना में 7वें को टेरिटरी ऑफ डाउट कहा गया है। स्फीयर ऑफ इफेक्ट्स यानी परिणामों के लोक के भीतर प्रत्येक ऐसे लोक में एक तथागत या ध्यान चौहान है, जो उस लोक की रक्षा और देखरेख करते हैं, न कि उसमें हस्तक्षेप करते हैं। बेशक सभी मनुष्यों में से अध्यात्मवादी हमारे सिद्धांतों को भयंकर अंधविश्वास के रूप में अस्वीकार करने वाले पहले होंगे। यदि हम उन्हें यह कहकर आश्वस्त करते हैं कि उनके प्रत्येक स्मरण में उसका संचार
I
की
think,
परमानंद। Yes, sister.
Meenakshi, I think we lost your sound. The audio was not audible for a little while towards the end.
I will try my best.
हाँ मीनाक्षी जी, मे बी आपका सिग्नल शायद ठीक नहीं है, तो आप वीडियो ऑफ करके केवल अगर ऑडियो से ट्राई करिए।
क्या अभी आप सुन पा रहे हैं?
हाँ नहीं, बीच बीच में आपका वो सिग्नल की वजह से फ्रीज हो जा रहा है, तो आप वीडियो ऑफ करके केवल ऑडियो से करके ट्राई करिए, तो
अच्छा,
शायद। हाँ जी,
ठीक ठीक।
वैसे अभी तो ठीक आ रहा है।
हाँ, ठीक है। अगला प्रश्न है, क्या देवाचन के परमानंद और जिनका छठा तत्व खोया है, ऐसे मनुष्यों के केवल अर्धचेतन एलिमेंटरी अवशेष के उपेक्षित छाया जीवन के बीच कोई मध्यवर्ती स्थिति है? क्योंकि यदि ऐसा है, तो यह अर्नेस्ट और जॉय जैसे स्पिरिचुअल मीडियम्स जो कंट्रोलिंग स्पिरिट में से अच्छे प्रकार के हैं, उनकी कल्पना करने के लिए ठोस आधार होगा। यदि ऐसा है, तो यह निश्चित ही एक घनी आबादी वाला लोक होगा, जहां से किसी भी मात्रा में स्पिरिचुअल कम्युनिकेशन हो सकता है। मास्टर उत्तर देते हैं, नहीं मेरे मित्र, यह मेरी जानकारी में नहीं है। सुखावती से लेकर संदेह के क्षेत्र तक आध्यात्मिक अवस्थाओं के कई प्रकार हैं, लेकिन मुझे ऐसे किसी मध्यवर्ती स्थिति की जानकारी नहीं है। मैंने आपको सकवाल के बारे में बताया है, हालांकि इसका मैं वर्णन नहीं करूंगा क्योंकि यह व्यर्थ होगा। और अभिची के बारे में भी, वह नरक जहां से कोई वापसी नहीं है। अभिधर्म शास्त्र में हम पढ़ते हैं, बुद्ध ने यह सिखाया है कि सभी सकवाल की सीमा के बाहर एक काला घना मध्यांतर है। जो इसमें गिरता है, उसके लिए यह सूरज या चंद्रमा के प्रकाश के बिना होता है। यहाँ से पुनः जन्म नहीं होता है। यह निर्दयी नरक है। यह अविची है और मेरे पास बताने के लिए और कुछ नहीं है। उस उपेक्षित छाया रूप को जितना हो सके उतना अच्छा करना होगा। अर्नेस्ट या जॉय जैसे कोई भी रूपलोक से कभी लौटा नहीं है। अरूपलोक को तो छोड़ ही दे। निश्चित ही एलिमेंटरी अवशेष का बेहतर प्रकार है और शेल्स या अर्थ वॉकर्स जैसा कि उन्हें यहाँ कहा जाता है, वे सभी बुरे नहीं होते हैं, लेकिन जो भी अच्छे हैं उन्हें भी माध्यमों द्वारा कुछ समय के लिए बुरा बना दिया जाता है। शेल्स को कोई परवाह नहीं रहेगी क्योंकि वैसे भी उनके पास खोने के लिए कुछ नहीं है। लेकिन एक अन्य प्रकार की आत्माएं हैं जिन्हें हमने नजरअंदाज किया है। आत्महत्याएं और दुर्घटना में मारे गए लोग दोनों ही प्रकार संवाद साध सकते हैं और दोनों को ऐसे संप्रेषण के लिए भारी भुगतान करना पड़ता है। और अब मुझे फिर से समझाना होगा कि इसके क्या मायने हैं। यह ऐसा वर्ग है जिसे फ्रेंच अध्यात्मवादी लेस पीड़ित आत्माएं कहते हैं। वे नियम के अपवाद में हैं क्योंकि उन्हें पृथ्वी के आकर्षण और उसके वातावरण कामलोक के भीतर रहना होगा उस आखिरी क्षण तक जो उनके स्वाभाविक जीवन काल का अंतिम क्षण होगा। थैंक यू। नमस्ते।
Thank you, Meenakshi ji.
थैंक यू। मैंने कोशिश की इसे ट्रांसलेट करने की।
Yes, very nice. It
नहीं,
was very nicely translated. Yes, Shikhar ji, you were saying something?
No, मैं भी वही कह रहा था, बहुत ही अच्छा और सटीक एक्यूरेट ट्रांसलेशन है, बहुत अच्छा मीनाक्षी जी।
Yes. So now I would like to invite any questions or points for discussion from our participants. And I'm sure there should be many because this is a topic of great complexity and
But I don't know if I can answer. I can try to, but let's see.
no, that is what it is for us to share with each other,
Sure.
and we learn more and discuss. So perhaps I would like Shinde ji to say something, or maybe Pradeep ji, and then we can begin some discussion.
But okay, if they are not saying, I just wanted to say this,
Yes.
that reading, I mean, on one hand, somebody may say, what is the use of reading such literature in the way that it is only intellectual and we don't know what is the reality. But while reading, in my personal experience, that the more and more we read them and refresh them and remember it in the, I mean, keep it in the mind, it really affects our way of living. Because when we know that we are at every moment, at every second, with every thought and with every action, we are making our future selves, then suddenly, I mean, it gives you so much of sense of responsibility or sense of, it puts a lot of, I don't know what word can I say, that you cannot help but to change some of the ways of living or thinking. I mean, then because you cannot blame anybody else for the things happening in the life.
Correct.
So that as we study, that man or human is the maker of own destiny, the reward or the sorrows or whatever. So, and it is so scientifically explained in letters and the other literatures that really, I mean, even it also helps us to a certain extent getting to understand the use or not so use of the post-mortem ceremonies or rituals, that once the person has left the body, then the only thing that can help or the person in the peaceful onward journey were the actions that or the causes that he or she has already produced, or the well wishes, the love, and the good thoughts of the people who were influenced by that person. So that's what I just wanted to share, that in that sense, this reading this, studying this, contemplating this helps a lot.
Very true, Shikharji. I think another factor is that it helps us to get rid of so many misconceptions. The half-baked knowledge which people gather from the scriptures or from other things, especially at the illiterate population where such kind of things are prevalent. So now we know the scientific basis, and it is not only that we exist as a human being with 7 principles, but then there are states with lesser number of principles. Those states, those levels of consciousnesses, they are very clearly described in this letter. So it also helps us to get rid of fear. And our best protection against all this is to develop our willpower and purity of mind.
Absolutely.
With these words, I think we can bring the session to a close, unless somebody would like to add something. All right. So thank you so much, Shikharji. I think we will still continue this letter in our next session.
Yeah, thank you.
So we'll end today's session with the closing prayer. Shindeji wants to say something. He's unmuted.
I have unmuted, but it is not opening. But I must congratulate Shikharji, nicely explained. Meenakshi also translated very nicely. Congratulations, and we are eager to listen more. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Your
Thank
presence is very encouraging always.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, we go to the closing prayer now.
एकदम काळं काहीतरी झालं. आता आलं.
Yeah, okay. Om Asito ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Lokaha Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukhabhag Bhave. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste. Thank you all for joining.
Namaste.